with an andouille sausage. Andouille sausage came to the United States via Louisiana through the French immigrants, and andouille sausage is distinct from any other sausage. It's smoked, and it's a little bit different than chorizo. It contains traditionally the trinity used in Creole cooking, which is peppers, onions, and spices. So we're going to slice it thin. We're going to use 5 links, which is approximately 12 ounces. And this is going to give us a lot of nice added flavor to the dish, because we are not using butter. We're cutting the calories a little bit. So the trinity for Creole cooking is peppers, onions, and I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to add some garlic, because I have a little bit of an Italian-American cooking background, and I like to incorporate garlic whenever I can, but it's not necessary. And you'll find that in cooking you can vary the ingredients to your tastes. So this is nice and hot. We're going to caramelize the meat. We're going to start the Maillard reaction. All the meat esters and aromas come out of the meat that way. We're going to brown it. So we're not going to use a whole lot of olive oil. We're not trying to sweat the sausage. We're trying to get a little color on there. So while that's cooking up, we're going to start the next component of the dish. We're going to get our onions. That Creole flavor profile. I have a Vidalia onion here. It's a little bit different, you'll see, because it's more of an oval shape. The other onions are more circular. It makes it a little bit harder to cut, but it's worth it because it's nice and flavorful and sweet. So you'll use a Vidalia onion or a sweet onion. Spanish onion will work. Yellow onion if you can't find that. And there is a proper way to cut an onion. As you can see, I'm cutting the core out. And once I do that, it releases the skin. I'm going to go all the way around it. Just take the peel right off. Next, I'm going to cut the sides. And I'm going to small dice it. So I'm going to go towards the core. If I don't, the onion's going to fall apart on me. I'm going to go lengthwise. Make sure your hand stays nice on top and secure, pressing on your palm. Follow through. Now I'm going to dice it. Notice the knife is always up to my knuckle. That avoids cutting the fingers. Again, towards the core. Use a nice sharp knife. Towards the side. About 3 slices in. So we're doing a small dice, which is 1/2 inch cube. Sorry, 1/4 inch cube. And then medium dice would be 1/2 inch, and large dice would be 3/4 inch cube. So we're going to add the onions in there. And stir to combine. Add a little bit more olive oil. You want to make sure the heat is a little bit lower now, because now the sausage is brown, and we're just trying to cook the onions until they're translucent. We're sweating the onions, so this is where the dish gets the base of flavor. Next, we're going to add some scallions, or sometimes referred to as green onions. We're just going to cut the ends off, and you can use the whole scallion. And we're going to reserve the top parts because they're nice and deep, full-colored green, and they look nice for presentation at the end. So we're just going to cut it on the bias for presentation. Again, I'm up to the knuckle when I'm cutting. I'm going to reserve the tops for presentation when I'm done. You want to have a nice yield on your vegetables. Use as much as possible. Waste not, want not. This is going to give it a nice pungency to the flavor, nice aromatics. onions. So shrimp jambalaya originally came from the French Quarter of Louisiana. Now, it originated because the Spaniards who were located in the area, the Spanish and the French who lived there, and the Spanish wanted something similar to paella, but they didn't have access to saffron, so instead they used tomatoes. So that's actually what I'm going to put in after my green peppers. So again, the Creole would use the tomatoes and the Cajun would take them out. And by all means, you can omit the tomatoes. You can throw them in there. You can add some other things if you like. But strictly speaking, that's what makes it distinctly Creole. Especially the andouille sausage. You can also use a chorizo sausage, which is a Mexican chorizo or a Spanish chorizo, and it's still pork. You have sausages is 70% meat, 30% fat. Pork in there. The andouille is a little distinct because it uses the lining or tripe of the pig. The chorizo typically has paprika in there, and it comes in a casing, so you just have to remove that. So I'm going to dice my green pepper, small dice. And when you're cooking, you want to keep everything at the same size, just for presentation. If you're going to dice your onions and dice your tomatoes, you want to dice your peppers as well. So I'm going to slice them all thin first. Now I'm going to turn it around and dice. Take a little bit at a time so you can get a nice dice on them. Again, up to the knuckle. And as you're cooking and slicing, so that you always have enough room on the board, you don't want to crowd yourself. You want to keep everything neat and clean. Keep stirring the ingredients. Finish cutting our peppers. Now, green peppers are traditionally used. You can add red in there, but the green peppers have a certain bitterness in there that makes it distinct. My peppers are cut up. Now we're just going to go with one pepper for today, something like that's enough. And now I'm going to add my celery. Again, the Creole trio: celery, onions, and green peppers. I'm going to add about four stalks. I'm going to slice these thin on the bias, just for presentation purposes. There's one. So you should be having the pot should be at a simmer right now. Nothing should be smoking, and you know something's wrong, and we have problems. So a simmer is, if you were to have water in your pot, you'd see a few lazy bubbles. And I'm going to add one more stalk. A little bit more olive oil. So again, we want to sweat the vegetables and make them tender. We don't want to caramelize the vegetables. So in a Cajun jambalaya, the browning of the meat is what gives it its distinct color. And the Creole jambalaya, we're going to use tomatoes. That gives it that red color and flavor from the tomato. Stirring it up, incorporating everything. So I've got to cook evenly. Now I'm going to add a paste. This is just plain tomato paste, nothing added. And I say nothing added because you really want to be mindful of what they're putting in anything canned. Obviously, tomato paste, it comes packaged. It's one of the very corn syrup, maltodextrin, which is basically corn, You want tomatoes, concentrated tomato. That's to be the only ingredient in your tomato paste. So this is going to give it a nice richness in flavor. You want to cook it until it's aromatic. You want to cook out the paste because it is very concentrated. So about 2 minutes stirring. Now is when we want to add our spices. I have some oregano, paprika, cayenne pepper, gives it some nice heat in addition to the smokiness of the andouille sausage. So this is what also makes it distinctively Cajun. I'm sorry, from Creole. You have similar flavor profiles in Creole cooking, Cajun cooking, Spanish cooking. Spanish cooking, you have a sofrito, which is your base, which is your garlic, tomatoes, and onions. And you have your trinity for Creole cooking. You have the onion, celery, and green peppers. So they have everything pretty much mixes in. You have your Cajun seasoning. Sometimes there's mustard in there as well. So people have requested, how do I make this cooking at home a little bit faster? And this is one of the methods I came up with, using a garlic crusher here. It's actually very effective. I, as a chef, shy away from lots of tools because we don't use them professionally. We use our hands. We use our chef knife for the vast majority of things. But this is actually pretty effective, I have to say. I'm pretty pleased with it. And it does make your fingers smell a little bit less, I have to say, because you're not getting the garlic in your fingernails and such. You just scrape it off. That's the one tool I think that I've used. So we're going to stir up the garlic. And I added the garlic after the onions and the other aromatics because I don't want the garlic to burn. Especially when I teach my beginning students, they tend to add the garlic and burn it at the beginning, which if you're keeping control of your heat, you can do that like in Asian cooking. You add your ginger garlic scallions first and then you stir fry under hot heat and you're okay, but you want to make sure you don't burn the garlic because once the garlic is burned, the whole dish is ruined. Alright, next we're going to add our tomatoes. This makes it distinctively Creole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my thumb all the way at the edge of the knife. I'm going to pull the core out, just go around in a circle. So that's the core of the tomato. And this makes it so you don't have to slice the tomato and you're wasting the whole edge. So I'm going to go with 3 tomatoes. Cooking is not so much a science like baking is. Baking, if the recipe says there's a half a cup of flour, you better measure that half a cup out and not estimate. However, in cooking, it really goes by the eye. It goes by the flavor. You want to taste your food throughout, and if you're cooking regularly, you have a pretty good idea of what effect salt and pepper has, certain spices, how much is too much spice. So right now I'm just slicing my tomatoes. These are plum tomatoes, and I choose plum tomatoes because they have a high ratio of vegetable to seed. So you throw the whole thing in there. As you can see, there's not juices and liquids falling all over like most tomatoes. So this is a little bit harder to slice. Technically, I could have a serrated knife out. I also used canned tomatoes, canned stewed tomatoes. I don't make it go by a little bit faster. And I tell that there's a little shortcuts that you are able to use in most of my recipes. And I do that because not everybody is a chef. Not everybody has good knife skills and can sit and chop. So those are shortcuts that are acceptable shortcuts. You're still going to have the lycopene in the tomato. It's actually a little bit more like your body absorbs the stewed tomatoes. The lycopene in there better than the fresh. It's just one positive characteristic. And you always have canned tomatoes ready in your pantry. If you've got pasta, dried pasta, and you have tomatoes and beans in your pantry, that's something that you can cook even if you haven't gone shopping or you're coming back from the weekend and and you don't know what to make for dinner, you don't feel like going to the grocery store, if you have a stock pantry of your oils, your pastas, and just your staples, your beans, you can make a lot of food. Rice is another thing. So my tomatoes are in, stirring it up to combine. Now you notice I didn't add salt, and I didn't add pepper. Now, I went to culinary school. We were big advocates of salt. Salt does bring the flavor out in a dish. However, we're trying to watch sodium here. We have sausage in the pot already, and that has a lot of salt in there as it is. I did choose a sausage that has a reasonable amount of sodium in it. What I like to do when anything I buy in a package at the grocery store, I read the label, because there are 3 different brands of andouille sausage, 3 different amounts of sodium, 3 different amounts of protein, and 3 different amounts of fat. So I chose naturally the one with the least amount of fat, the least amount of sodium in there, and obviously all organic. When I'm cooking meats, I like to cook organic only. So now we're nearing the end here. So that was pretty quick. And we are, oh, my timer went down here. Fresh ingredients whenever possible. So I'm just going to rough chop my parsley. Take away the stems. With fresh herbs, you don't want to bruise them. So you don't want to over chop. Parsley, I'm not concerned here with chiffonading it. If it was basil, I would chiffonade it because it's a little bit more delicate.
What is chiffonade?
Chiffonade is slicing thin. It's a French term. Italian cooking, they typically go a little bit thicker. Same thing with cooking Creole dishes. It's French terminology. The French pay a little bit more attention to presentation, their knife cuts, the way they cut herbs. Doesn't change the flavor, it's just for presentation purposes. So our parsley's added in. Now, the one thing we have not added yet, and our timer turned off, is the shrimp. So we're going to add that at the very last minutes of cooking, because shrimp cooks very quickly, and you want to cook it until it's opaque. You do not want to overcook shrimp because it'll become rubbery. So we're going to throw the shrimp in and remove it from the heat to avoid it overcooking. Alright, so now we're at the last step of our shrimp jambalaya. So I have a pound of medium deveined shrimp. It's clean. Pouring that in there. Alright, I'm going to stir it up. Very important, you do not overcook shrimp. I just want this shrimp to be opaque. I'm going to turn off the heat, and that'll be it. So, to finish the cooking, I'm going to cover the shrimp up and steam it. Just until it's opaque. If you overcook a protein, it tends to become rubbery. So that's an undesired effect. And here in our jambalaya, the shrimp is the star, so we want to make sure it's nice and tender and not chewy. And we have our brown rice. Now typically you use traditionally a long grain white rice, but to keep things a little bit healthier, I chose a brown rice today. Equally as good, gives it a little bit maybe of a more of a nuttier flavor and texture. Let's give this a stir, check on our shrimp. We're almost there. Give the rice a stir. So an interesting thing about shrimp jambalaya, the mayor of Gonzales, Louisiana, declared shrimp jambalaya is the capital for shrimp jambalaya, and that was in 1968. Another interesting story, the Richardsons of Virginia once gave President Franklin D. Roosevelt in his 3rd term shrimp jambalaya to eat. Unfortunately, President Roosevelt had an allergic reaction to shellfish, so he had to refuse it, unfortunately, so that upset the family. Alright, our shrimp is cooked. The last step, we're just going to add the rice. So the thing that I did differently is that I cook the rice separately. That is a way that you can do jambalaya. However, the traditional way is to cook it in the same pot. But we're trying to do this cooking demo to teach people that you can make healthy meals rather quickly. So it's going to taste the same. The only difference is that when you cook the rice in with the meat and the fish, traditionally, it tends to thicken the dish. Instead of doing it that method, we have added tomato paste in here to achieve that same thickening effect. We're going to stir it up. The thing that makes jambalaya different than gumbo is that in a gumbo, you use okra and you put the dish over the rice. So we're kind of mimicking a gumbo, but we are also have it distinctly a jambalaya for the ingredients that we use, the Creole ingredients, the Trinity, and for the andouille sausage as well.